Hey, I'm Butterfly.
Hey, I'm Firefly.
Have you ever wondered if we aren't being told the truth about everything?
What have we been lied to about? Join us as we have conversations and ask questions about everything. We invite you to keep an open mind and consider the unfathomable.
Let's break the chains that enslave our minds. Come on, let's go down the rabbit hole. Hey, Firefly.
Hey, Butterfly, what's up?
Well, as we were mentioning on our last episode, we were going to start to talk about who are they. Because
Yes.
you know how when we talk about all the things that are going on in the world, and we were talking last episode about what woke us up,
Yep.
um, there's always this idea that they are doing something and
Yes.
they have a plan, or you got to watch out for them. So who exactly are they?
That's right.
That's what
And
I'm
they're
wondering.
and they're it's ambiguous, right?
It's very ambiguous.
It's not completely clear because obviously their strength is in being cloaked, right?
Right.
So they don't want us to know.
Mm-mm.
So we kind of have to just, again, kind of like the analogy of the mushroom, where we're in the dark getting fed doo doo,
Yeah.
we have to read the tea leaves and kind of make some assumptions. So, and the dynamics are complicated. What I'm starting to kind of see is it's kind of a web.
It is a web. I mean, obviously, we know who some of they are. Like, at the lower levels, we think like, oh, presidents, prime ministers, those kind of people.
Yeah.
But that's like the bottom level. It goes way above that. We start looking at people like Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Klaus Schwab,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Elon Musk,
Yeah.
all these
Donald
people,
Trump.
Donald Trump, um, all these people are part of who they are. But I don't think those people even, George Soros seems like this evil, totally evil character who's running the whole show. But I actually don't think he and Klaus Schwab are the ones at the top. I think somebody's telling them what to do,
I think so too.
you know?
And I think as you look, they look like they're order followers. They're carrying out orders and they're doing what they were told to do.
Right.
And I think they are definitely aligned with evil. And I think maybe they have a sense of that and don't care. But I don't think they fully know the entire plan. I think that they get told to go out and carry out their part of the agenda. And they're taking their marching orders from puppet masters above them. So I think all those people you just mentioned, Klaus Schwab, I think he's a puppet. I think he's a
Mhm.
front man. He's like a salesman selling the agenda to people.
To people under him.
Yeah, and his audience is the millionaires and the billionaires and
Mhm.
the Davos crew and the people who think they're cool because they have a ton of money. So I think he's a salesperson who's sent out there to go and sell. But he's not. I don't think Klaus Schwab makes any decisions, nor does Noah Harari. I think that these people come out and they do PR for the cult and they spit their agenda and they try to sell people on the idea.
So they go to like Davos, their big convention in Switzerland, and they go and they talk to all the young WEF,
That's
World
right.
Economic Forum people, and sell their ideas about climate change
And
and
real quick, can I
everything.
even point out,
Hmm.
have you ever looked at the WEF website and seen all the people who are part of that university? You know, the young leaders. It was people like Trudeau
Yeah,
up in Canada, who's a total occulty
yeah.
member, and people like Gavin Newscomb, you know,
They've all graduated
they've
from
all
that.
graduated. And you
Yeah.
know who surprised me too was what's the governor down in Texas? Greg Abbott.
Oh, he was part of that
He
too.
is part of it.
They
And look at how he oversaw this porous border that we had.
they're all part of it. So they all go to that thing. They're all like graduates from the WEF, and they all follow these orders. But what I'm wondering is, okay, obviously the people at the very top must be total psychopaths, right? To be
Yeah.
because they want to rule over us. They want to control us. They want to kill us. They want to depopulate. So they've got to be psychopaths because they have no empathy or
Absolutely.
any regard for
To know that
us.
they're carrying out that part of the agenda, and the agenda is depopulation and poisoning people with chemtrails and all
Playing
this stuff,
God.
you have to be a psychopath. You have to be like, you know what? My conscience isn't burdened by all of these horrible things I'm doing.
Yeah. So then I wonder, like, okay, this is what I just want to know. Like, do these people sit around a conference table and discuss this stuff in detail? Like, do they say, you know, we've got to eliminate a lot of these people. So
Yeah.
how should we do? Let's come up. Do anybody have any ideas? Like, oh, I know, we could have a vaccine, a poisonous vaccine. Okay, good one.
Like that
Let's do
Simpsons
that.
episode. Did you see that Simpsons episode?
No, it's not.
Oh my gosh, 1993, they had a Simpsons episode, and the networks were like, um, we need to come up with a plan to get people scared and back in their homes where they belong. And the one TV executive was like, well, we have this vaccine we've been working on. And he's like, that's great. And then the other guy's like, the only moral thing to do is release a deadly virus on the population. And it was like, oh, wow. So they're kind of divulging the plans. I think they do have those conversations, but I would say people like George Soros and Hillary Clinton and all of the names that we associate with the cult, I don't think they're making any kind of autonomous decisions. I think they're getting told their marching orders.
But do you think that they're privy to the plan? Like
Not fully.
we know that George Soros is a complete psychopath. He's a total
Yeah.
sociopath. I mean, do you remember that interview on 60 Minutes?
Where he said he was Jesus or the Messiah or something like that.
Maybe it was the same one, but it was like back in the 80s or
Yeah, I
something.
saw it.
They were talking about how, it was like during the Nazi time, and some man had taken him in and said that he was his son to protect him from, because he's a Jew. And then
And then his job was to go fleece the
his
Jews.
job was to go steal all the stuff from the Jews. And the
And he's all, it
Mike
was
Wallace,
very happy making time. I had a very happy time.
yeah, and I think it was it Mike Wallace doing the interview? He's like, how did that make you feel? Like, did you have remorse? Do you feel bad about
Mhm.
stealing from your own people?
Oh,
And
no, no.
he's like, no, because
Yeah.
what did he say?
He's like,
If
it was
I
very
didn't do
happy
it,
making time. If I didn't do it, someone else is gonna do it. It's
yeah,
like,
I mean
oh, okay.
that
Well, there you go.
that logic is like, like, oh, if that person walking down this, if I didn't mug that person on the street, somebody else would have mugged
If
them.
I
So
hadn't run that guy over, somebody was gonna.
somebody else
I
would have.
mean, I might as well hurry up and do everybody a
I mean,
favor.
how do you reason with that
That's
kind
how
of
it is. It's like, hey,
sociopathic
somebody
mind?
else was going to be Jewish and go and fleece the Jews. And then, like, he was probably there going, this way to the Shabbos. Come on, and
Uh,
get on the train. You
I
know?
mean, it's just so horrible and evil. But so we know he's a psychopath, and
Well,
I'm
not only
sure.
a psychopath, but I think he also exhibits another type of personality trait that I think a lot of these people have, which is megalomania,
Oh yeah,
where they are so full of themselves and they think they're really important people and that they are just so powerful,
yeah.
And I think he thinks that because later on in that interview he was like, I am the Messiah, and it's like, you're a Messiah? Yes, I am. Like, he thinks he's like,
God.
he thinks he's like God. He like has godlike powers and he's here to bring about sweeping changes, which sadly he kind of has.
Well,
Because
this is
I mean, if you look at Ukraine, I mean, George Soros's fingerprints are all over that, and
these
everything.
people have a lot of power, and you know, even though there's probably somebody above them controlling them, um, they're just puppets. They do have a lot of power, and they're telling people below them what to do. And then I start wondering, okay, so there must be other psychopaths down the line, because those people, even at the very top, are not going to be able to concoct like a vaccine or some kind of thing to kill
That's
everybody.
right.
They're going to have to talk to a scientist. There's got to be an evil scientist that knows the recipe, and then maybe it's like the
Dr.
atom.
Fauci.
I don't even think Dr. Fauci, but it's probably like the atom bomb, where every person it was so compartmentalized. Every person had their one little job to do that nobody really saw the big picture, but somebody sees the big picture because somebody has the master plan. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's really what I'm curious about. Like, who are
That's
these?
why I think it's a web. That's
Hmm.
why I think that web visualization. I heard David Icke talking about it because he's looked into the cult, as he calls it, for a long time. And the overall structure that he's kind of laid out, which I agree with, is there is some type of off-world entity that is the source,
The source of the evil.
the source, like the fountain of these plans. And it's coming from a knowledge that's beyond human. It's so because I have a biblical worldview, I call it Satan, and these people are aligned with Satan, taking their orders from Satan. And this plan has been in place for a long time. I don't know how long, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 years. And it's being carried out like a script. And
Hmm.
I think what's going on is people align themselves with it and they might not know the entire plan, but I think everybody knows that their CEO is Satan. I think everybody pretty much knows that. So these people aren't innocent of aligning themselves with this agenda. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
No, I don't think they're innocent at all.
I think they might not know the whole entirety of the plan. And especially you're talking at the ground level when you're talking to people like, um, take a scientist who's doing gain of function research, but thinks that they're doing something good for humanity.
Yeah,
Maybe they're kind of lying to themselves. But I
maybe.
think, if you're sitting there trying to make a virus as kind of souped up and deadly as possible, you ever like stop and think, should we be
Might
doing
not be
this?
such a good idea.
I don't know. Like
Seems like maybe
it's kind of like that Jurassic Park line. Remember Jeff
just because
Goldblum?
you can doesn't mean you should.
That's it. Like that, that's a conscience. Like
Yeah.
someone saying, you know what? I don't know if this is the right thing to do. So, my opinion, there is a web and there are frontmen and there are people on the ground level carrying this out.
Mhm.
But I think ultimately, every single human being that's involved with this evil plan is doing it knowingly and also is ignoring their conscience.
Mhm.
Because look at how people like you and me are saying that's horrible. I don't want to align myself with that. You and I are in no way, shape, or form aligned with it.
Right.
I'm not making any money off of Satan. These people are. And they're they have lavish lifestyles. And those lavish lifestyles are all predicated on being a part of this agenda. And I think people know that, but they're like, I don't want to think about it because what would that mean to my financial wherewithal?
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think for a lot of them, they they've probably gone so far beyond the financial situation because they have so much money. I think it's more about power. They don't want to lose their power that they have, and probably the idea that they can have so much power over so many people and so many countries.
Oh yeah.
It's probably
They're drunk
they're
on power.
drunk on power. It's something they don't ever want to give up, and they can't imagine living without that kind of power. And they have this sort of God complex idea that they can play God. They can decide
Yeah.
who's going to live and who's going to die. And they probably tell themselves that, all these useless eaters, like they like to refer to us,
Yeah.
we aren't necessary and we're not as important as they are. So,
Yeah, and in their warped mind, they probably think that they're doing some type of beneficial act by eliminating the population, you know?
well, a lot of the, crazy climate people, that's their whole MO is they're basically saying that they need to get rid of all these people to save the world. Now, that doesn't really make sense. So what are you
Yeah,
saving the world for?
they believe that the
Yeah.
earth is like this organism that is under attack from a virus called humanity.
Yeah. And so they need to eliminate a lot of us so that
Mhm.
they can save the world. But, what are you really saving the world for if the people are going to be gone? You know?
Well, that's right. And what was the world created for if not for human beings? And that's where I think a biblical worldview comes into play is, God created the world for mankind. The, the world is not sitting there going, oh my God, I'm so sick of these humans, you know? And I think you're right. I think maybe that is the selling point that people at the World Economic Forum put forth. Like you have Al Gore, who for some reason flies around in his private jet with blood. I don't know why.
Oh, he's got blood in there
He's
too.
got blood in a fridge, and it's like,
Wow, that's interesting.
yeah, I've never had blood on hand, but that's just me. Some people. But anyways, Al Gore is
Like
another guy.
Dracula.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't know what that's for. Do you need infusions on the plane or whatever?
It's really
I
creepy.
think they drink blood. I've heard. Word around the campfire is these cult members drink blood and they do weird Satan rituals and kill kids, which I don't know. I've never been to one of those meetings, but I bet you that's going on.
Well, you know what? That's going to be a topic for another episode because I've heard a lot about that too, and we will get into that.
But let me talk about like Al Gore as an example at World Economic Forum.
Flying
He's there,
jet.
flies his private jet there, and but then he'll just say, well, I put out more carbon than anybody else because I'm an important person. And
Right.
I have to, again, I'm a megalomaniac. He probably thinks he has a messiah complex. He's like, I'm very important. I have to be here for these meetings because the world would basically go to hell in a handbasket if it wasn't for me, Al Gore. So he actually comes out and I think he sells with like show movies like An Inconvenient Truth. His job is to sell climate change.
Oh, yeah.
And to sell this notion that you need to go live in a 15-minute city. You need to eat bugs. And you need to go move into an apartment complex that's attached to a shopping mall. And you only get to leave that region about 3 times a year. And you get to eat meat on your birthday. But other than that, you'll just have crickets and stuff.
Yeah.
And just, come on. It's for the earth. Do the right thing.
You can't drive past 20 miles or whatever. You can't get on a plane more than 3 times a year, if that. But I can get on my plane.
But I eat steak every night, and I travel around, and I have a lavish lifestyle. But see, I'm an important person,
and I'm making the plans. So I have to be here and do that to make the plans for all of you.
Everybody can't have what I have. The earth can't yield that. That's their mentality.
Yeah, him and Jim Carrey, right? He's the other one.
Jim Carrey. Wait. John Carrey.
John Carrey.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey might be playing the part.
Waking up. Or he might be playing Biden. I don't know. That's hard to tell.
Yeah.
I've been hearing people say I was listening to Tucker and Matt Taibbi the other day.
I listened to that.
What I noticed is they were both kind of saying, I've only been awake to this idea for like a year. And I'm like, dude, where you been, bro?
I know. So I don't know. I have some doubts about that. But
they're both like saying, well, I was flabbergasted by 9/11 and we were just reporting the news and I can't believe we were reporting the news and we weren't even talking about any of this stuff that led up to 9/11. It just came out of nowhere. And I'm like, dude, let's wake up and smell the coffee.
Right.
And that's Tucker Carlson talking like that.
Well, so, this will kind of lead us into a topic for another episode too, which is, do we believe that all of those kind of people that are now supposedly underground news type people, are they telling the truth or are they controlled opposition? But, when you say Tucker Carlson says he just woke up like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's, we think that's sort of ridiculous because he's kind of in the know. He should know these things. But then I have to step back and look at my own place, which is I pretty much just woke up like 5 years ago with the COVID thing. And that there are people out there that woke up 20 years ago and they've known for years and years that something's not
and they're
right.
probably looking at you and me and going, where have you been?
Right.
Right. But at the same time,
an open mind.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the key to all of this, actually, this whole thing called life is to have an open mind because, if you don't have an open mind, you can't ever really learn anything new.
That's true.
And there's always more to learn. Like the more I learn, the more I realize that I don't know as much as
I think what that allows you to do is avoid trappings like cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance is a very real thing where you can show somebody a fact and it's an irrefutable fact, but they're like,
they refuse it.
Yeah, it's like, but wait a second, this is a fact? Okay, so if this is a fact, then there are certain realities that this means, and you're like, no, my Kool-Aid. I'm going to drink my Kool-Aid.
I don't want to believe it.
I don't want to believe that. And I think that's what happens with people is they get locked in. Like, have you talked to somebody lately and said that was a Trump supporter and like wears the Trump flags and
Mhm.
drives around with the Trump shirts on and everything? And you go up to them and say, what if Trump is in bed with this cult? And they're just not even open to that
They
idea.
won't even
And I'm
consider
not
it.
saying I know for a fact that Trump is in bed with this cult, but I think it's plausible.
Well,
And they won't even consider it.
I think, if there's anything that we've learned in the last several years is that they, whoever they may be, lie to us. And we don't know the whole truth about
And we don't know who's
everything.
with they all the time,
We
right?
don't. And so we don't know even some of the most basic things, which might be like, where are we in this world?
Yeah. And I think that I've had a lot of conversations with Flat Earth and I've been reluctant to accept the idea of Flat Earth. But just the other day, I had a revelation about Flat Earth.
Well, I think that's a good topic for our next episode.
We can talk about that.
Yeah, because I think really what we're figuring out is, and kind of what makes me start questioning everything is when I realized that they lied about something so big
Like
as
COVID.
COVID, then I start asking, what else did they lie about? And then I start looking into other things. And, I think we just have to question everything because
Absolutely. Because what we're talking about is they. What we can kind of agree on, and I think it's a fact, is that they run the world.
they run the world.
And if they run the world and they are lying to us, and from what we see, they want us dead,
Yeah.
is it conceivable that they have lied to us about rudimentary understanding about our reality?
Our reality and
Like
our existence.
our Earth is not a globe rotating around the sun. Our Earth is a flat, stationary Earth, kind of like the beginning of the Bible in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And could there have been evil people, part of this cult, hundreds of years ago, who put forth these notions, and they became canonized in our education system? And so people just are so quick to accept, oh, yeah, no, wait a second. It's because I think that's the nature of they. They want us. They want us believing.
Trapped. They
Yeah.
want us trapped. Basically, I hope that people will continue to have an open mind and listen to these conversations because I know that it gets to a point with some people where they can only go so far.
Mhm.
I have friends who they were totally against the COVID scam and all of that and the vaccines and everything else. But once you start talking about the possibility that Trump may be doing things that aren't quite right,
No,
they completely shut down. They
that's
totally
right.
shut. And then there's other friends where, you say, it's possible that we aren't spinning on a globe millions of miles an hour while, simultaneously the sun is going around. It's possible that this might not be the case. Those people sometimes just they shut down. They don't want to hear anything else.
That's part of the aspect of they. They um, control both sides,
Mhm.
and they put out both arguments. And so, what they want people doing is arguing about these things because if I'm in this camp and you're in that camp, then we're not working together. And I think that's the nature of what they want is they want us disagreeing.
They want us to see.
And they want us being like, you know what? Screw her. I don't even want to talk to her. She believes something that I don't fully believe in. So I'm never, ever talking to her again. And people are like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just over here in California, but I don't know. I think it's kind of like that everywhere. Like if you bump up against somebody's no zone, they're like, I'm never talking to you again.
Yeah. They think you're weird. And, if you're thinking this way, then you must be weird about everything.
Because I remember when we were out there on the corner and we were protesting COVID,
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of people, like you said, that were obviously in agreement that the shots were dangerous, that the healthcare system had been hijacked, that we were being basically poisoned by they, and they could agree with that.
Mhm.
But then when you get down into some of the nitty gritty of what else they might be doing, if they disagreed with you about any of those points, it's kind of like an orthodoxy. People have like a religious belief about stuff
Mhm.
where, no, 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 our orthodoxy doesn't believe that. So I'm just never going to talk to you again. And I think we need to get past that and we need to kind of learn to agree to disagree about some things, but find out where we do have common ground.
And I think that's totally true. And just remind ourselves to keep an open mind
Mhm.
because there are things that maybe we would have never considered 5 years ago. And now here we are talking about them. And, um, now I was sending you some stuff about flat earth a while back
Yeah.
and you were like, nah, I can't really go there. That's not really,
Yeah.
I'm not really, that doesn't really make sense. And now suddenly you're kind of like, maybe there's some sense to it, like let's just explore the possibility.
Yeah. And
Let's
we can unpack that a little bit more next episode,
Yeah.
but I was thinking, could it be that Galileo and Copernicus and these other scientists were actually in the cult and were actually back then? Because, like I said, my understanding of the cult is they're taking their orders from an eternal off-world entity that's interdimensional. So Satan is eternal. So Satan could have been controlling people back in the 1600s and the 1500s and the 1400s when this new quote unquote knowledge was coming out about, hey, the biblical understanding of the world is false. Now science, because that's kind of what the whole argument is. It's this triumph of science over the biblical worldview. And I think it's possible that those guys were carrying out their orders of planting the seeds of lies that became canonized. And we all got lied to about something as rudimentary as the dynamics of our planet,
It's
and is it a planet, you
yeah,
know?
that's totally plausible.
So for this episode, though, I think what we really wanted to just ask the question of is who is they
Mhm.
and why are they doing what they do, and how many of the people are privy to what the ultimate plan is, right?
That's really the big question.
Yeah.
How many and who of they are privy to the plan? Because I think like what I had mentioned before, how whoever they is at the very top isn't sitting around a lab concocting stuff like a mad scientist because I don't think they would know how to do that. So there's got to be psychopaths down the line that are actually in
Yeah.
on it and know the whole plan. Like, there's probably some psychopath at Pfizer or some psychopath at Moderna, whatever, or one that does both of them or something that, okay, I'm making the recipe for this poisonous shot.
Have you ever seen
Yeah.
Albert Bourla? Have you ever seen the guy?
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at him and just tell he's a slimy lizard
Yeah.
and he'll align himself with evil.
Right.
And he's happy to do so
Yeah.
just so that he can be enriched and he can feel like a big somebody and be at the Davos
But I
parties.
think he's a puppet.
He
I
absolutely
think
is.
he's totally a puppet. Like
But he is doing, like you said, carrying out the
carrying
bidding
out.
on this very at the ground level. He's the CEO. So he was telling people, if you want to work here, you're going to go and create this disgusting thing that we're going to shoot in people with like dead baby in it and stuff.
Like, so this is what I picture. I picture like, somebody like him, somebody like Anthony Fauci, coming in and like having like I don't know how they would find these people, like do you think they put out an ad on LinkedIn or something? Like we need a psychopathic
I don't
mad
know.
scientist.
I wouldn't be surprised because LinkedIn's so culty like that.
But they
LinkedIn would
could
probably be like, "Oh, look at here's the newest influencer."
I have mad scientist on my resume.
That's right.
So
Like under like title, it says psychopath, and they're just like, "He's good."
okay, let's call that one in for interview.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking, they probably like they somehow find these evil people and then they have like a little meeting with them and they say, okay, now here's what we want to do. We want to like kill like half the population and then
More than that.
this
According to the Georgia Guidestones, they wanted to bring the population down to 500 million.
Yeah.
So that's only about, seven out
was
of
like
eight of us
that was
being
like
cold.
90%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're
So,
not going to make it unless
but
you're in the bunker.
so do you think maybe they tell these mad scientists, okay, this is the plan, and these guys have such an ego that they go, wow, I could be the one that brings them down, and then
Totally.
those so he comes up with the recipe, he comes up with the whole concoction, but then he's got his whole team of people, and he's got maybe 20 people under him that have like 25 people under each one of them, and they each give one little order, and one each person is mixing one little concoction, and they don't really know the big picture when it goes down the line
Yeah,
you know
I think so. But, like we've talked about before, I think that even at the ground level, even like if you're the janitor working for Satan,
you know
you know,
you know
you just kind of got to go, you know what? I'm going to go be a janitor someplace else.
right.
Just, I understand what's going on here to some degree, and it's evil. And it just,
Mhm.
like anybody who, like you and me, and other people out there who might be listening to this, you can smell evil. You
Mhm.
can just kind of sense it, and you just go, you know what? No.
Right. But most people, like what we've talked about before, just they won't stand up for what's right for
Well,
many reasons.
there a lot of people
Yeah.
worship money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say I'm going to take your money away, they're just like, I'll work for evil. It's okay. I'll
Mm-hmm.
do it. Or you'll have people, like I've heard people kind of go through a similar thought process with the shot. Have you ever talked to somebody who's taken the shot and you're like, did you take the shot? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, you know,
They know it's
and it's like, yeah, but I was going to lose my job
Mhm.
and I got my kid. And I was like, yeah, and are you supposed to like do evil stuff just because someone's going to take your money away? I mean, maybe you should do the right thing and just trust in God. That's my take on it. Or if you don't believe in God, if you don't have a biblical worldview, do the right thing and trust that that's going to be rewarded.
Mhm.
You're going to be rewarded with, you're not going to die. You're not going to go without. You're not going to be homeless down by the river. And even if you are homeless down by the river, you're going to sleep good because you're not doing evil stuff. That's my mentality. So I think that the people that are carrying out even the low level stuff are cognizant of what's going on. And what we're seeing is people coming out and doing whistleblowing and then
Right.
getting killed.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, Boeing. Was it Boeing? Yeah, it was Boeing.
Yeah.
Remember, as about, I
Yeah.
can't remember, some months ago, they had the guy come out and do whistleblowing and then just somehow died in a weird kind of
They
way, like
all
kind
they
of
all
murdery.
sort of end up dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the message is from the cult and
Mhm.
from they. I call they the cult
Mhm.
because I think it's a cult
It is.
because um, you have to genuflect to it and you have to drink the Kool-Aid, right?
Mhm.
So it's a lot like, Jim Jones kind of thing. So I think what happens is the cult says, if you go and you start telling people what we're doing here, and it starts impacting things, you're dead. Because it's not any whistleblower. Some whistleblowers come out and their big whistleblower reveal kind of falls flat. Like if you remember the Google guy, do you remember that guy?
Mhm.
He came out and he was like, "Oh my God, Google discriminated against me for being a white male." And they were like telling me I'm fired because we don't want white males anymore. And he came out and he made a big reveal about that. And everybody was like, oh, this is going to change things. And it just like 5 minutes later, people forgot.
Yeah.
So he's probably still cruising around, probably got
He's
another job.
he hasn't been unalived
He hasn't been unalived yet.
yet.
That's right.
Maybe he
But
needs to come out with a bigger
but you
story.
find somebody who's actually doing damage to the cult, they're probably in deep danger because the cult, I think, has real power right now.
Yeah.
They have control over uh, probably our military,
Oh yeah, for sure.
police,
Mhm.
you know, and so that's why it's kind of perilous having these kind of conversations to some degree because you're going against a power structure that is in power. But I think another aspect of this conversation of they, and we can maybe talk about this another episode too, would be, do you think the cult is losing power right now? And do you think power is shifting? That was kind of what Tybee and Tucker were talking about. They were kind of suggesting that we're coming into this age of exposure where all of these things are being revealed and these entities that have been in charge for 50, 60 years are freaking out and they're
Hmm.
going, oh my gosh, we're losing power. Like you hear Klaus Schwab at WEF going, one of the big crises that we're going to face over the next 5 to 7 years is going to be the censorship of the internet. We need to make sure that people do not say stuff that we don't like. They have to eat the bugs and they have to be happy.
Yeah, I do think that they're losing power because I think so many more people are aware and awake and finding out, and it's so much harder to keep things secret now.
Yeah.
Everybody, no matter how they try to censor, the word does get out, and
It's like
it's
whack-a-mole.
yeah,
They can't constantly keep
they
censoring
they
everybody.
can't keep it all quiet, and I think it's sort of like an avalanche where it starts out kind of small and it builds and builds and builds, and it's like gaining more and more momentum and getting bigger and bigger, and more people are finding out, and you just can't control it at some
I
point.
think so. I think the internet was something that they figured that they'd be able to control.
And I think it got away from them.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it wasn't what they thought it was. I think they thought they were going to be able to control us, which they are trying to do with digital ID and everything, which
But
we'll talk
so
about. But
that kind of brings up an interesting aspect of they. Yes, they're powerful. Yes, they're in control right now, but are they fallible? And could they fail? And do they have weak spots, kind of like the Death Star in Star Wars, where
mhm,
he shot the laser in that perfect spot where the whole thing blew
mhm.
up? What if they're vulnerable in that capacity too?
So we just need more people to become aware and figure this all out, and we need to find their weak spot,
And I think that's what we started this
right?
podcast for, Butterfly.
Yeah,
I think that's now starting to kind of really touch on the specific um, motivation for us to start this
right.
podcast. Because you and I, we haven't really been like these ambitious people all our lives where it's like, I want to be famous and I'm going to go and do this stuff. Well, I don't think that's the impetus for this. We're not doing this because we're like, I want to be a big somebody. We're literally doing this because we're seeing that this cult might have an Achilles heel.
And we want people to know what's going on. And the more people that hear about it and talk about it, this is why we just want to have these conversations. We
Yeah.
want to have these conversations, and we're inviting other people to join these conversations so they can have more conversations like this, and hopefully spread awareness and
Like
people
I'm
start
curious to see people
asking
who
questions.
comment on our
I
stuff.
know.
And then we can kind of like start conversations like that
Yeah,
because the ultimate dynamics of the situation is the cult is greatly outnumbered by the people.
exactly.
And so what we need to stop doing is arguing with, oh, well, that person's gay and I'm straight, or that's a woman, I'm a man, that person's black and I'm white. All of those are the cult manipulations.
Mhm.
They want us fighting with each other because so long as we're fighting with each other, we're distracted from the whole truth
Right.
that these people are the enemy and they are a small group of people controlling the entire world.
It's divide and conquer. That's what they do. And that what you just described makes me think about this great meme that I saw kind of in the beginning of this whole thing. I don't know if you ever saw this one where it said we need to organize, and it was a little fish, and then they all a school of fish turned into one big huge fish with a big mouth, and they were like eating the bad fish. So
That's
it's
right.
like one little fish swimming around this way or one swimming around that way. It's not going to work. But if we all figure it out and work together, there's way more of us than there are of
That's
them.
right. And that's what it comes down to. And in order to do that, you have to go back to what you were talking about earlier. People have to have an open mind
Mhm.
and they have to be able to disagree about something and still be able to hang out with somebody and talk to people. And I think the key for us people, we're the little fish. In order for us to become a school, is we need to stop worrying so much about what we disagree about and try to find common ground. And if we can find common ground, and then we can all understand that this cult is who it is and what it's doing, that commonality is going to be the key.
And I think the first step to all of that is to open your mind.
That's it. That's it.
Because if you can't even fathom that you're being lied to by the news or the government, then you won't even consider that these things could be happening. So you've got to first open your mind and realize that,
Yeah.
you know, there might not be 100% truth in what you're being told.
You think? Maybe.
Maybe.
Unbelievable. Like some of the
Maybe
things are just
98%
ridiculous,
truth.
Like even like the Trump assassination, I look at that as kind of an example. Like, do people really buy that? Everything about the Trump assassination attempt,
I call it the shooting. Um, but we're
it's
gonna have an episode about that because that's a
it's
that's
it
a
felt like a movie to
that's a
me.
really sore subject with the people who
Oh
are
yeah.
diehard Trump.
They believe that Trump is our hero and
Yeah,
we better not impugn his character.
right. But
Well,
you have to have an open mind.
I think we had a little bit longer discussion today, but I think it was really good because um, who they are is an important discussion.
Hmm.
So last week we talked about, or last episode, we talked about how we woke up and how you and I met. Today we talked about the dynamics of who they are, which I think is complicated and maybe we didn't comprehensively talk on it, but we brought up enough to that people can start asking some good questions about who they are
Yeah.
and the dynamics of the human race and what's going on geopolitically. What do we have on store for our next episode?
Well, since we did kind of touch on this topic a little bit, should we talk about flat Earth?
I think we should pepper that into our next episode for sure. I don't know if we have a whole episode worth, but we'll try it. And then maybe we can have some other topics that we join in with that. But for sure,
I think we will have a whole episode on that.
you have a lot to say about it. Hey, that's fun.
We both have a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
So maybe,
I have recent revelations about it too. Like
that's what I want
when
to
I
hear
was talking with my friends.
because we haven't talked about it.
Yeah, so let's do that. So then our next episode, we're going to delve into the treacherous territory, no pun intended, of the flat Earth.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Butterfly. It was great talking with you again.
Great talking with you, Firefly.
Okay, bye now.
How long was that?